Morning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Wow, this is a beautiful day, and I'm so excited that we've got five great members of the media here to tell us a little bit about their unique perspective as journalists covering the arts in South Florida. This is really actually fabulous that we can all come together online like this. So we have five panelists today, and I'm going to ask the panelists to unmute themselves. I believe they have the ability to do that. So I'm gonna hand this over to the panelists that are here today. I think I'll begin with Melina. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you, the media outlet that you're associated with, and how you in particular and the media outlet approach coverage of the arts?
Yes, good morning. Thank you to everyone for joining us. I actually am editor of two websites at the moment and about to start a third one, but for purposes of today's discussion, I think the most relevant one is artburstmiami.com. I joined the Artburst team after more than 20 years at the South Florida Sun Sentinel, where among the different departments, I also helped cover the arts for a few years. So I came to Artburst with a little bit of that background. And I was thrilled to join the team because I so believe in the mission. Artburst is a hub for media. We use top-notch journalists to cover artists and organizations in visual arts, dance, theater, film, and we later promote those stories on our website as well as through social media and through other media outlets, including the Miami Herald, the Sun Sentinel, Miami New Times, WLRN. We keep expanding our reach in terms of the publications that are using, that are using our copy. So it's really a win-win situation because a lot of these publications, because of the changing times and the depleted newsrooms, really don't have a lot of arts journalists anymore. And so we're able to provide them those stories free of charge.
Great, thank you so much, Melina. Russell.
Good morning, how are you?
Good morning.
First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion. It's very much needed, and I love to give good information to the masses. I'm editor-in-chief of 3 magazines: Legacy Magazine, Legacy South Florida, that is, Legacy Miami, and also MIA Magazine. This is an entertainment magazine, MIA, and Legacy is a business magazine. They're all published inside either the Miami Herald or the Sun Sentinel. I got on board about 4 years ago and had no intention of getting back in the business. If I can back up, I'm a career journalist. I've been a news anchor reporter in Jacksonville, Florida. That was my last big job, but I got burnt out, to be perfectly honest. And I decided to leave that career, go to grad school, get my master's degree, and then figure it out. Well, realized that I loved teaching. So now I'm a professor. I teach broadcasting at Florida Memorial University. And by the way, my students thank you because I had to cancel my digital classes this morning to attend this session, so they thank you. But love teaching. But then I always had the bug to continue journalism. And so when this opportunity came for me to become editor-in-chief, I jumped on it for a number of reasons. I love the mission. It's positive news targeting African Americans in the South Florida area. And then secondly, it's inside the Miami Herald and the Sun Sentinel. So we're getting that readership, if you will, from tens of thousands of people. So both of those two components compel me to jump back in, and I get to do it part-time. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what I do and why I do a little later on in this broadcast.
Thank you, Russell. Marivette.
Hi, good morning. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy. So I am the founder and editor of The Mujerista. It's a digital publication for Latinas. Our goal is to empower and celebrate Latinas, millennial Latinas in specific, in the US. We launched in 2018 after the 2016 elections, and we were trying to fill a void of sharing stories, positive stories that uplift the Latina community in the US. And so we feature a lot of interviews with young artists, both nationwide and in Miami, that are creating community or empowering Latinas throughout. And we ask them, we feature celebrities, directors, producers, young artists, and we also carry a lot of journalistic pieces as well.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to go to Bruce now. Bruce, can you introduce yourself?
Hello. Hi, I feel like the odd one out here. Got a whole bunch of awesome art publishers. So my name is Bruce Pinchbeck. I am one of the co-founders of Where By Us, which is the publisher of The New Tropic in South Florida. We are not an arts publication, but we feature a lot of arts and culture in the newsletter. Our motto is live like you live here. And it should be clear to everyone on this call that what makes a city great is the arts and culture surrounding it. It's not the roads and just the pretty buildings. It's all the things that you do in between work and going to sleep and hanging out with your family. And so it is one facet of how we think about Miami is arts. We don't do a ton of coverage like other publishers here, but we try to highlight things that can get people out and active. We're always action oriented. This is happening. Here's why you need to go. We try to keep it concise. And this all lives within our daily newsletter. So there is limited real estate. So we keep our stuff really short and sweet. And I guess that's it. And then we also have an event calendar that is pretty popular with our readers. And that's just about what are the things we recommend that you should go out and do and experience the city. And a lot of times we're featuring organizations on the call.
Great, thank you, Bruce. And then our final panelist, Dani. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your outlet?
Yeah, hi everybody, good morning. Can you hear me? Yeah. My name is Dani Tapia. I am the creator and curator of Art Scene 365. It's a social media platform for promoting the arts in South Florida, and I concentrate on the visual arts. So my aim is to let people know what's going on in the visual arts in South Florida. And I also keep a calendar of events on a daily basis that is, it's inclusive of all the events from museums, galleries, as long as it's in the visual arts. So that's
great. Thank you so much. So a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different focuses in terms of how each of our panelists cover the arts in South Florida. We're going to get into a little bit of more detail on exactly, how these journalists prefer to get pitches, what makes a good pitch if you're trying to get a story out there. But before we do that, I think kind of to address the elephant in the room, we're obviously living through really extraordinary times right now. And it's particularly difficult for anyone who works in the arts industry in South Florida. The social distancing movement has obviously forced the closure of a lot of arts venues. So these are definitely exceptional and unusual times. So my question for the panelists, and I'll give you each a chance to address this question, is have you found any silver linings in any of all of this? Have you seen, I guess, signs of resilience in the arts community? A lot of people innovating to keep the arts strong and vibrant, maybe moving to online platforms to communicate with audiences. So is there anyone in particular that'd like to take that question first?
I would love to. One of the things that I noticed that I was so heartened to see is that organizations seem to, rather than show shock or numbness to what was happening, they jumped right into action and immediately started offering online performances, virtual tours. I mentioned Artburst Miami, but I also am editor of MiamiOnTheCheap.com, which has been really focusing a lot on type of community help that you can get. And we started noticing immediately all these organizations pitching to us letting us know that they've either tapped into their archives and are offering all of this new content, I mean, all of this old content rather, and some of them are almost every day. I mean, it's like, it's hard to even keep up sometimes with the calendar because there's a virtual tour or virtual performance happening somewhere on any given day. So it's been really nice to see the immediate response to it rather than just kind of taking a step back and panicking. Everybody kind of jumped into action and said, okay, what can we do? And I think it's that kind of initiative, that's going to help us survive and thrive at this time.
I agree with Melina. So the Mujerista has actually started reaching out to a lot of our past interviewers and asking them if they would be interested in putting together some sort of a virtual performance using our platforms, or creating some fun breathwork techniques, or just how to make a cocktail. So something lighthearted and fun that sort of takes your mind off of everything that's going on. And we've been getting a very positive response where everybody does want to contribute. Everybody wants to find a way to help out and bring some sort of light to to the darkness that's around us. And so it's been really fun to see how people are shifting and sharing their stories. And we've also been reaching out to local businesses that are small businesses that need help, whether it is to, show our viewers and followers how they can support these local businesses by purchasing gift cards or ordering online. Everyone wants to find a way to help them out. And so we're trying to pivot now at this time to show ways that people can support while also bringing some lightheartedness to everything that's going on.
Dani, I think you wanted to respond. Did you have a?
Oh, I just wanted to point out that many of the local organizations really mobilize to show things online and to gather resources for the community, for the artist community in particular. I wanted to highlight, for example, the Fountainhead Residency, who immediately moved their their Artist Open initiative that it was going to happen in May to happen online. And then now artists are showing their studio visits, having studio visits online as starting since yesterday, and it's going to continue. So many of our local organizations really mobilize very quickly to help the artist community to the same with locus projects, to gather what are the resources that the artists need and that the community will need to go through this time. So I think
Great, thank you.
the resilience is there.
Bruce Russell, did you have a comment about this question?
Yeah, I know my magazine, we have a weekly newsletter that comes out every Wednesday, and typically it's designed to promote any entertainment and arts that's going on in South Florida. Well, as a result of COVID-19, we've switched gears and we're not promoting these fun events, but we're giving good information, news that people can use regarding COVID-19, and it's proved to be very successful. People are responding, and there's a thirst for that information. So I'm just happy and pleased that we have this avenue that we can push out positive information, particularly at this time when nobody can have too much fun and go out and just hang out in South Florida.
Yeah, I think everyone here is flagging some really, really good points. From my perspective, the things I'm seeing is, first of all, when it first started developing a few weeks ago, and we started to see the first examples of businesses being closed or talking about social distancing, we saw immediately sponsorship dollars dropping rapidly. A lot of our sponsorships are events. What better way to let people get together than let them know in publications? I think we all know that. And so that immediately kicked us into, okay, we have to go investigate what's going on out there in the community, because we are already a remote company. And so we were still in a bubble. And I think at first we panicked, and then we were like, let's go talk to people. And very quickly we realized, one, everyone's resilient, and there are a lot of people changing in really smart ways. So that gave us hope. And then also there are a lot of other businesses, sponsorships, et cetera, organizations who are ramping up efforts in this time. Any veteran marketer will tell you this is, if you have the budget, this is a great time to ramp up, because you're going to leave your competition in the dust. Coca-Cola did that back in the 90s. and in the late 80s. And we're seeing that now. Some of the conversations about people that need community goodwill, or they want to support the community for other initiatives they're working on at other times, they are around and they are looking for opportunities. So I think if you're creating awesome content, there are people out there who can support it. It's not endless money, right? It's not going to be the end all, but it can be a stopgap between now and the end of this. So that's just one thing. And then I think we are still seeing how technology is shaping up here in this time. I am really, really excited to get a whole bunch of people who are not video creators making video, because the content is amazing right now. It is so much fun. The writing that I've been seeing is so much fun. It's needed relief. I am sure everyone here, I get super anxious and ramped up when I am on my phone too long. But then you see some really nice, I think John Krasinski did his good news thing or whatever, and that was just awesome, lighthearted stuff. But I'm seeing it within our community and nationally. I've seen things like drag brunch taking place, and I think that's an awesome idea of people participating at home. There's been symphony performances from their houses and their rooms. That is a beautiful thing. And I think what we're going to see is that a lot of the content creators up until now, you would think of Twitch or live streams of that sort, and it's video games or kind of oddball stuff, like binge eating and that randomness, or people that have a very big YouTube personality, and it's designed for that YouTube personality. And you're seeing creators now coming out that are just I'm a gym teacher, I'm making cool content. And I think if there's anyone who's got the creative spirit, it's these arts orgs here and has talent available to them that can create really compelling new content for the internet. And I think I see someone in the chat had mentioned to us about your audience can go much farther now. And I think you shouldn't be afraid of that. We have our supporters locally, and that is critical. That's got to be the core of the business. But you're going to start to see some really interesting moments here as you go digital. And I think you should embrace that and think about who else are you reaching and how.
That's a great point. Well, thank you guys so much for addressing that. Seems like there's a lot of optimism and kind of an understanding that the arts are rising. Artists and businesses together are kind of rising to the moment to help keep people inspired, engaged, sane, perhaps. So all right, I'm going to move on to some of the next questions. Just a reminder, you're welcome to type in questions in the Q&A. We'll take a pause in about 5 or 10 minutes and get to some of your questions. So if you have questions for any of the panelists in particular, or for all of them, we definitely want to hear them. So the next question I have for the group here is, well, actually, this is for Russell and Marivet in particular. Your media outlets focus on a very specific audience or community, and I was hoping you could kind of tell us, what the thinking was behind that, why there's a need for that, and how that specifically impacts your coverage of the arts in South Florida.
So we started the publication in 2018. It primarily stemmed off of the 2016 election. We just felt that there was a very negative sort of hateful rhetoric that was coming about in terms of Latinos in the US. And so me being a millennial Latina, I was looking for some sort of an outlet that would share in my, I guess, disappointment and what I was feeling at the time. And I couldn't really find anything that was targeted for Latinas that wasn't entertainment or fashion related. And so I was looking for stuff that had more substance, that was sort of showing how much power we do have and what we are doing in terms of changing the community. And so the idea came about to just create it myself. And so that's how it all started. I started looking for contributors online. I would reach out through Twitter, through Instagram, who would be interested in sort of going on this journey with me. And luckily, the community there was so small that they started, connecting me with many others in the community that were interested in joining me. And we started off by just sharing more poetry or short stories or personal opinion stories. And then it started to grow so much that we wanted to now go more with, showing what's going on in specific communities throughout the US that are predominantly Latinx.
Maribeth, so
yes.
just for the people who joined late, can you say the name of the media outlet again, and where
Yes.
where people can find you?
Yes, thank you. So it's The Mujerista. It's online. It's www.mujerista, mujerista.com. And our Instagram is also at The Mujerista. Twitter is at The Mujerista and all that. So we started really ramping up in the last year just because there was such a need for it. And now we're seeing there's so many other smaller sites coming about that are in the same vein as what we are doing. And I think it was just speaking to how much people in the community were really looking to find stories that, shared what they were going through or what they have experienced, and wanting to see what, how much power we all have and what we can do to change this sort of idea that some people some people might have in regards to Latinos in the US.
Okay, so it's a national publication then, Maribeth, is that correct?
Yes. So it's national. We share stories from throughout. We are now trying to, share more stories from South Florida, just because a lot of what you do see that is national primarily talks more about like the Mexican American experience, or the California, New York Latinx community experience. And so we want to start sharing more of what the South Florida Latinx community experience is like, just because it ranges from throughout every region, which has been pretty kind of exciting to see how different all these regions are in terms of, the Latinx experience. But now we want to kind of give a platform to those in Miami to show how much there is going on and how much of a movement there is as well.
Great, thank you so much. And then I'm going to hand this over to Russell to talk a little bit about the publications he works on.
Yeah, well, my publication, Legacy in MIA Magazine, was established 16 years ago by a gentleman by the name of Dexter Bridgman, who's from New York. And so he tells the story of coming to Miami, opening up the newspaper, and seeing a list of real estate agents, dozens of real estate agents. I guess they were being honored. And he noticed that only one was African American. He said, surely there are more than just one African American real estate agents in South Florida. So he decided to come up with a publication that would acknowledge, that would highlight African Americans who were doing great things in South Florida, typically on the business tip. And so Legacy, we have themed issues that honor professionals. This particular issue honors our academics. We have our power issue, which is coming up in April. We're going to honor the top Black professionals in South Florida who are movers and shakers. And so that was his vision, to show a positive light of African Americans that mainstream media wasn't necessarily doing. And so it's become wildly successful. We have, our publisher likes to tell the story that we are probably in more households than Ebony Magazine right now. That's how broad our distribution is. And that's just in South Florida. We're also on digital, which reaches, the world. And so I guess the thinking is that we need to focus on more so the positive influences of people of color in South Florida. And so that's why I got on board, because quite frankly, when I was in mainstream media, I mean, all we saw was, mugshots every day in the newscast. And quite frankly, it got really depressing. And so there's so many other stories to tell. And as a journalist, I pride myself in being a storyteller, love telling stories. And so this gives me a little bit more control as to the type of stories that I tell. And it helps me translate this to my students at Florida Memorial University, who I teach broadcast journalism to. And so they can see their professor in action, practicing what he preaches. And it just makes me, to be quite honest, a better person. I feel like I'm a better person because I'm doing something very positive for our readers and for the community.
Thanks, Russell. I appreciate that explanation. I'm going to pause for a second before we get into the meat of this panel discussion about pitching outlets and what you look for in great stories. And I'm just going to stop and look at the questions that have come in and the comments. We have one from William Sanchez. This is actually directed to Bruce. It says, "Great take on sponsorship, Bruce." So thank you, William. And then we have a question from Augustina to Marivat specifically. It says, "Marivat, you mentioned Mujerista came about after a need to address avoiding Latino publications. Amid COVID-19, do you see potential opportunity and coverage? Are there certain stories you would gravitate to, maybe real stories of adaptation or corporate citizenship by Latinos?" So I'm going to let you take that question.
Yes, so we're actually right now trying to pivot to have more stories that do address that. We are reaching out to a lot of small businesses throughout the U.S. that are Latino owned, and we are asking them what it is that they need in terms of trying to stay afloat, what kind of messages they want our readers and viewers to know as to how they can support them. And then in terms of corporate companies, we're reaching out in terms of finding out if there's anything that they can do to help these small businesses and local entrepreneurs as well. So we have a couple of things in the works right now where we are working with them to see if we can either get some sort of sponsorships for them in the future or get some money out to them to help them stay afloat. I hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next question. So this is really about, the stories you tell, how people can how people in the arts world communicate with you. So for those of us who live and breathe PR and journalism, we know there's a difference between a press release, a media release, and a pitch, for example, which is when you just reach out to a journalist with an idea. So I want to talk about, we'll kind of get into the distinction between those two methods or techniques for talking to the media, but I want to ask you all, what are sort of the three things you look for in a media release, and when a pitch versus a media release might be better. So is there anyone in particular who wants to take that question first?
I can speak to press releases, having spent 2 decades at the Sun Sentinel, now with 2 websites. You can imagine countless press releases. You see all the do's and don'ts. And I can mention 3 things, that are very important to an effective press release. 2 of them are going to seem very simple, but you would be amazed by how many times you don't see it. And that's, number 1, the full information. You'd be surprised by how many times you see a press release where you have to scour all 2 or 3 pages and you still can't figure out where it is, what it is. And if there's one thing that I'd like to emphasize above all today, it's that, with newsrooms being as depleted as they are, each journalist is doing a million things and really doesn't have a lot of time to track down the information before deciding if it's going to become a story. So a lot of times, unfortunately, if all the information is not there, the editor or the journalist is going to have to move on. The second one is proper grammar and spelling. If there have been press releases where the names of the artists are wrong. If you see, a artist's name spelled incorrectly, if you see improper grammar, it loses seriousness, it loses credibility with you. And the third one, very important, and it's kind of a 3-parter, photos. An effective press release really should have at least 1 JPEG photo. And here is the critical part to this. You really want to try to give the most information that you can. And I do it now, I receive pitches and press releases all the time, but I'm also sending out our stories, our artwork stories to other media publications. So I have to do this myself. You have to make sure that every photo comes with caption information that clearly identifies people that are in the photo, obviously not if it's a group of 20, but if it's, you know, if it's 5 easily identifiable people from left to right, first and last name, and please, 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 a photo credit. A lot of times you'll hear an organization say, oh, you know, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to give us credit. A publication cannot run a photo without giving proper credit, even if it's, you know, courtesy of United Way, for example, or whatever the case might be. But it really, really helps if the photo, you know, already comes with proper identification, with a full caption and credit. Those would be my 3 key things to include in a press release.
Great. Anyone want to add anything to that?
I would add also just having links to, let's say if you have a website or a YouTube channel, if you're an artist or a musician, so that we can see more of your work in case we are interested, but want to see more of what you have going on and make sure that it aligns with your mission or your goal. So I would definitely recommend adding links as well.
I'd like to add something, relevancy. So I get a lot of press releases and they mean nothing to me because the executive or whoever wrote the press release did not make the connection. So I have a PR exec that's upset with me right now because she sent me a press release about one of her clients and it was like, okay, why are you sending me this press release? And it's not enough just to want to promote your clients. You have to make some sort of connection. And so when I told her that I couldn't use it because there's no, you know, it's not like he got a new job or he got a promotion or they just sent me a profile about somebody and there was no connection between why they should be in my magazine. Now, yesterday, for example, I got a press release and it was about a company. And in fact, the founder of the company is being honored in my Power issue next month. But the relevancy was that his business has a connection to COVID-19. He runs a telemedical company, which is allowing patients to have doctor's visits from home. That's part of what they do. So I'm like, wow, this is relevant. And I want it in my magazine in the next issue. You see what I'm saying? And so they got it when they sent me that press release. They made it relevant to what's happening right now, and it was very timely. So that's what I'm looking for. Otherwise, you know, you're wasting your time and your paper just trying to, you know, shoot me an idea that's going to go nowhere.
That's a great example. Bruce, I saw you laughing at one point. Do you want to add anything to the conversation?
So I think maybe to play off what Melinda was saying and what Russell was saying is, you know, help us win at our jobs. We don't have a ton of time. The resources are incredibly scarce. And if you're not hooking us quick and showing how this is important and relevant to our audience, and it's not a clear connection, it's not like I can give it a ton of time. And I'm not the one that picks pitches, but people reach out to me all the time. And if it's a really compelling, like, oh, they get it, they know our audience, this is why it's a perfect fit, I forward it over like immediately. And that typically is a good way to get in front of Lance, our director at the Nootropic, or any of our publishers. So please don't bombard me with pitches. But when you do hit me up, it's got to be like, wow, okay, they get the audience clearly. And possibly tell me about why, like, how would you plug it in? Especially like our real estate is limited. And you could be like, I think this is the most compelling thing. We're going to do a happy hour with the artists beforehand, and you're going to meet so-and-so celebrity performer, and we'd love to invite the Nootropic out. Like those things. Okay, I understood that email quickly. I'm going to send it over. But I always think about, and when I'm pitching someone about new business or sponsorship, it's got to be able to help them with their job. Like, how can you make them look good for their boss or their audience? And I think it all comes down to this when you're reaching out to journalists and publishers. Help them make the best publication they can.
Great, thank you. Okay, so what I'm hearing is you'd like these pitches or media releases not to be voluminous, like 2-3 pages long. You want it to be pretty short and to the point, the who, what, when, where, all the facts up front. Make it relevant and timely. Why now? Why your publication? So people should know why they're reaching out to you. And proper spelling and a caption info for images, definitely include images, and links back to website, social media channels, etc. So those are all really great points. So I'm going to let you actually talk a little bit, and Russell, you mentioned one already. Tell us about a pitch that you think stands out as a good example of someone who's met all those, of someone who's met all those criteria and has done all the right things, or if you have in particular an example of someone perhaps who almost got it right but made a few mistakes, and you want to just sort of talk a little bit about that. Please share. Does anyone want to take this question in particular? Good example?
Well, actually, that was my example. I didn't mean for it to slip so soon, but yeah, I was very happy to get that particular pitch, because the focus of my magazine is now changing because of COVID-19. Like I said, typically my magazine, we honor all these great people, but we didn't feel that it was appropriate to really just be happy-go-lucky and honoring these people at this particular time. So the focus of my next issue is going to change, and we're going to really, try to make it more relevant to what's going on with the coronavirus. And so any connection to that is going to help me with my mission and help make my next issue successful. So again, I just can't stress when you're pitching the story, you have to know the publication. You have to know what we're all about. So folks got to do their research, and then they'll have much more success in getting their clients and getting their stories published.
Melina or Dani, do you have anything to add? Any examples of good pitches that you received?
Yeah, I was gonna say that in my case, I don't really receive that many formal pitches because my format is much more kind of closer to the audience and a smaller audience too. So it's much of a social media, more of social media interaction. But I also think it's important for people who are part of that audience, or for artists that want to be featured, to understand how each outlet works. So for example, I usually don't publish anything that is not my own pictures. Very rarely I publish something else because it's in my case art scene, so these are things that I have to have seen. So but still, it doesn't mean that artists don't send me things. Oh, I have this exhibition, I would love for you to come. So they know that I am trying to cover mainly South Florida, and sometimes Florida. I did see a comment in the chat where people are saying it's not only people from Miami here. So for example, I do try to go up north to West Palm Beach because I feel like people in Miami can take a day trip and go to a museum on West Palm Beach, etc., etc. But and the point of relevance, yeah, it helps to have that connection and understand what the outlet is publishing, what is the style, and what kind of publication they are doing, and then you can actually craft your message to these people. So for me, a good example of an artist who is a young artist who actually rented her own space and she created her own show, and then made sure to let me know, like, I would be the perfect, for me, that would be the perfect show to go to, because even though I cover museums, galleries, this is an artist trying to do it for herself. So she actually made sure to give me that information. Hi, I rented this space for the weekend. I'm gonna have my show. I would love for you to come to see it. And then I made sure that I was there to support her because basically, it aligned very well with my mission.
So you're not getting a lot of media releases or anything like that.
Well,
but
I do. Sorry. No, I was going to say that I do get them because I subscribe, but it's not necessarily that the museums are pitching something to me in particular.
So how would someone pitch you exactly? By email, social media? Like, what would be the method?
Well, in my case, I feel like it's my responsibility to be on the know of what's happening locally. So I'm subscribed to, all the outlets that have to do with the galleries, that all the newsletters, museums, the artists, the organizations that have to do with visual arts. But I do have people, like at some point, another great example, I think I can mention it by name, for example, the MOD, right? The Museum of Design for the, for MBC, that's in the Freedom Tower. At some point invited people to come see an exhibition. So they actually reach out to different people, influencers, people who have outlets, and say, we want you to come and see the exhibition and experience it and have the curator talk to us. So, people can reach out if they know that this is something that will be of interest for your audience and how you portray stories.
Well, this segues into another question. I'm going a little bit out of order, but I think it's a good point, a good time to bring it up. How important is social media as a source for your story ideas? And let me put the question another way. To all the artists and arts organization out there, is it important from your perspective as journalists that they have very vibrant and frequently updated social media channels? And do you source a lot of your story ideas just by looking at social media and what's happening there? So is there anyone that wants to address that question first? How important is social media to getting your story ideas?
Yes, so because our platform started on social media for the most part, it's very important. We also find a lot of our contributors through social media, whether it's we reach out, and when we reach out, it's typically because we are seeing that they're very active on their Twitter, sharing the stories that they've written recently, or sharing on Instagram the stories that they've written recently, as well as we get to see their passions. So we are able to see the kind of stories that they like to tell. And so for us, it's important. It lets us see that you are active, that you're currently writing, what kind of stories you like to tell. It makes it easier for me to know as well, when it comes to certain stories that we want to share or feature on the site, who are the best contributors that we can go to in terms of, hey, can you write this story for us? So for us, it's very important. We also, I think somebody asked whether we only receive pitches through email. I know that I get them online as well through social media channels, and I do look at them. I then try and have it go towards email just because it's easier to communicate. But for me, having a social media presence and having it maintained and it be active really helps us, because it also shows to a lot of our contributors, once they do write a piece, they will share it on their own channels, and it helps support us as well in getting our stories and our platform out there.
I will say that social media for my media outlet is becoming more and more relevant because that's just where the industry is going. So just yesterday, for my staff, we hired an expert to give a webinar about LinkedIn. And so we want to be able to efficiently and effectively use LinkedIn for our business. And so for about 2 hours, she showed us the ins and outs and how to, maximize that particular platform. And so because I'm always looking for professionals that are doing great, LinkedIn is like the perfect avenue for that. And so now, she's taught me how to identify these people and connect with these people. And as a result, yes, I found writers on LinkedIn. I found some professionals that, nobody even knew about because, they don't necessarily brag about themselves, but we want to tell their stories. And I just meet, great people on LinkedIn. But I think my particular publication, we were a little slow to get to social media. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because, we wanted to hang on to this magazine. We wanted to hang on to the print version of it. And then sales, that plays a big role in it because, advertisers, I guess you can't get as much money with online than you can with print. And so that the economics of it plays a part of it as well. But I think that's definitely the direction that we have to go. And moving forward, that's how, we have to plan. And I think that's how most media outlets have to plan if, they're going to be successful and survive in this industry.
I wonder, Melina made a point earlier about the importance of proper grammar and spelling and things like that, because it establishes your credibility. I wonder if today, in today's environment, maybe you have an example you can point to. If someone pitches you a story and then you go to look at their social media channel and they've either got nothing or it's extremely poor quality, will that affect this artist or arts organization's credibility in your eyes? And are you likely to maybe, I don't know, pass on something as a result? So can you just talk about how social media channels impact, I guess, your sense of the credibility of the artist or arts organization?
I would say so. I would say, you know, just as it's you putting your, you know, face, your work, to showing it to the world, and it's representative of what it is that you are doing. So even if it's, you know, if it's social media, now I mean, I wouldn't get into, you know, if you go on someone's profile and you see opinions you don't like or comments, or that's a whole other, you know, that's a whole other thing. That's where I think it starts to get intrusive, because you're supposed to be judging, you know, the release, but, or the pitch rather. But I do think, you know, if you do go on a site and there's not much there, or it's you know, it's poor quality, or, I mean, you have to take everything into consideration. In the past, before social media, maybe it would be an attachment, you know, to the email, or but in terms of just going back to the previous question, I would say, you know, we use every tool at our disposal to get story ideas, and I think you should try to use every tool at your disposal to try to give story ideas. I think if we see something through social media and it's a good story, we'll jump on it, regardless of whether it comes in an email or through social media.
Can I say something? I was gonna say that also completeness counts for social media, and saying it as someone who's consuming a lot of it, since my outlet is mainly on social media. I also realized that a lot of organizations, not only the artists, but the organizations, feel like because the post should be you know, short and sweet, and that's true, but also information needs to be complete, because nowadays a lot of people doesn't have time to go to social media and then go to the website and then go to the email to see what you are promoting. Like, each post should be complete. It should have, you know, what is the event that you're talking about, when it's happening, where it's happening. And it's okay that it's long and maybe somebody just want to see the picture and it won't go into reading everything. But it's also good that the information is there, and then the people that are using social media as a tool for actually really quickly see where they are going or what they are going to see, they can find that information. So I see that as a, you know, failure of many social media outlets, where people are just doing just hashtags, and then you don't know what is that they are saying or what is that they are promoting. So people should write, and if it's a little bit long, you know, people have the option not to read it, because people are afraid of, oh, this is going to be too long, this is not a blog. No, the information is there. It has to be there, so that if somebody needs it, can go there, use it. And that's it. You just hashtag happening tomorrow. This is a great thing when people say this is happening today or tomorrow, and you don't know when this is coming into people's feed. So you should say this is happening tomorrow, Tuesday, March 31st, because so whoever is seeing it is, oh, already, you know, I got too late to it. It already passed, or okay, I have time to see it. So I think that's a common mistake people do for social media.
That's a really good point. I want to back up a little bit and just kind of go back to one of the earlier questions we had, because you really great points about social media. What about, you know, reaching out and pitching a story or an idea, do you have any tips in general for how people can make an otherwise boring pitch more interesting, or any specific examples of creative pitches that you've seen, or do you feel like we kind of covered that already at this point?
Well, since the camera's on me, I was going to say something that comes to mind is Lisa Pally. So I work with Lisa Pally a lot, and she's always pitching me stuff. Hi, Lisa. I know you're on this conference call. And so it's just important to almost be just very vivid and visual, you know, make me see it. And if I can see it, chances are, you know, I'll grasp it and it'll come off a little better. For example, Lisa has this event that comes up every year, and I can't think of the name of the event off the top of my head, but it involves actors who go to a hotel and they perform these scenes, period scenes at a hotel, and people can actually come to the hotel and in the hotel room, and then they actually can visualize the scene. And so every year she pitches this story to me.
Hotel stories, I think.
Yes,
Hotel
the hotel story. Yes, hotel stories. And you know, because of how she pitched it to me, and I actually got it, you know, because I've never been to it. So, you know, if you've never seen it or been to it, you won't know how effective and how great it is. And so I think that, I guess my point is the way that she gets her point across and the way that she pitches it makes it more visual was very helpful to me, and we actually did a story on it.
Great. So really putting the reporter, journalist, or editor that you're pitching into the experience, you know, telling them how they're going to experience whatever the particular, you know, event is, would be helpful. We have a couple questions. I'm going to go to those. And then I have two more questions for the panelists. So Carol Ann asks, what are you doing to cover arts events that are happening now? For example, she said she curated an exhibition at the beginning of the month, and she's looking for someone possibly to review it. Now with everyone staying home, you know, how would you address that type of situation? Is there an opportunity for her to get coverage of the exhibition even though people are not going out?
Well, I'll tell you, I just had a conversation with someone who runs an art gallery in Overtown. It's the Ward Rooming House in historic Overtown. And I sent them a message because I saw another gallery on social media. They had like this virtual tour. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing. And normally, I guess they charge you to go to the art gallery, but because no one's, you know, going out now, they decided, hey, you know, what do we have to lose? You know, let's put this on the internet so people can like walk through. Since everyone's at home and, you know, perusing the internet anyway, let's give them, you know, an open view of our gallery. So I suggested that to my friend who runs the Ward Rooming House to do the same thing. I mean, it's the perfect opportunity to promote your event. So I say that to say, if someone else isn't promoting it, you promote it. I mean, you know, on your social media platform. So don't wait for a media outlet to pick it up and run with it. You know, you just have to pick up the ball and run with it yourself.
Thanks,
Yes.
Russell. Yeah, I think that's good advice. And Bruce, sorry, Melina, I'll let you talk in a second. But Bruce, that speaks to something Bruce had mentioned before, just about all this great new content that's emerging as a result of this situation. So hopefully, Carol Ann, you can take some of these ideas and run with it. Melina, did you have an answer too?
Well, no, I was just going to say that, you know, at Artburst Miami, what we're trying to do is a variety, you know, we're tackling it from different angles. We're trying to do stories on the types of challenges that the different, you know, the theater companies are facing or individual artists are facing, as well as all kinds of virtual offerings. You know, if you have anything, as Russell mentioned, where you can tour it virtually, or, you know, by all means, please, you know, send those along. And also we're trying to, you know, we're hoping to do profiles on artists, you know, musicians, all kinds of profiles where people can get to know who's who's out here creating in our community, even though, you know, those performances might not be live right now, even though those galleries might not be open right now. These are the people that are creating in our community, and we can still profile them so that the public get to know them.
Great.
Yeah, to sort of, I'm sorry. To sort of piggyback with what Melina and Russell were saying, so what we're doing, I think I mentioned this earlier, is we're reaching out to some of the artists that we featured in the past, and with some of the new pitches that we're getting, we're sort of pitching to them, not just to do these featured stories on the site, but to also have live sessions with them, whether it's on Instagram or through Google Hangouts or Zoom meetings. It creates this sort of more like intimate and personal connection with our readers and viewers when we do that. So I actually think that as devastating as everything that's going on, it's sort of good in the sense that now we are seeing more ways that we can promote or present your stories to our viewers and readers, because now we can get creative in terms of not just writing up a story for you or attending your event, but we can now just have a more personal interaction between our readers and the artists that we're featuring. So last week we had a virtual meetup on Instagram Live with an artist, and they presented, you know, some of the work that they're doing. They did a small, you know, acoustic showcase of a song that they wanted to promote. And then they were able to do Q&As with our viewers. So people who were watching were able to ask questions about, you know, where the inspiration came from or how they're handling things. And it created a better or a more intimate personal connection. So there's so many possibilities that we can still do, even though we're not able to physically get to you, or things are the pitches are kind of changing up a bit. We can still share these stories. We just are getting more creative or presenting them in different ways now.
Great. So I just wanted to let everyone know the last question I'll ask the panelists in just a moment will be, you know, how to get in touch with them. So I know a couple of people wrote about that and said, you know, how can we reach out to the great panelists that are here today. Hang on, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to give every one of them a chance to tell you exactly. Before we do that, I want to ask one last question. So the media landscape has obviously changed, and certainly from what I'm hearing from you all today, that some skill with technology right now in this particular environment will really go a long way in terms of communicating and getting stories out there about the arts, since we're all, you know, sort of housebound. What about paid content? Does your do you work with paid content? Do you take, is there a wall between, sort of in the traditional media world, there's sort of a wall between advertising and editorial, but things have changed a lot. And, you know, sometimes, you know, some outlets are kind of blurring the line there where you can get a lot of great content, but there's sort of either a base sponsorship or something like that. So does anyone want to talk specifically about that and how your outlet views the whole paid content world?
I can take a first stab. I think that is pretty much us. So we have very limited real estate. We, in the daily email newsletter, we have essentially one reporter who produces and does the newsletter and does the storytelling around it. And that's it. We do community contributions. We do year reviews. Those are typically like civic based, sometimes cultural based, and dealing with the arts and others. But we'll accept those things. And since there is a limited real estate, there is, you know, obviously a certain demand for people to get coverage. We do cover arts and culture as it, you know, bubbles up, and as we get those awesome pitches and people we've built relationships over the years that we think do great content, and we can trust that if we send our audience to them, it's like no brainer, they're going to have a great experience. Those are things that we do feature a lot of in rotation. Lance is really, really good about trying to get outside of a bubble. He will make a list and think of who hasn't he talked to and figure out what they're doing. And that's just, you know, his awesome journalism background and time with the Herald. He is very intentional about it. But we do have editorial content that is disclosed as advertising. And it reads, because it's written from our creative team, it reads the same tone, the voice and that, but we make sure there's a, you know, a break in the page so our users can understand it. I don't think we always get that right. and we're always trying to iterate on it. You know, if you look at early newsletters versus today, they always are changing how we try to present it because we get questions or feedback and that, and we want to make sure there's no confusion there. You know, I think it's just one part of the equation for our revenue to try to make these different types of brands and reach people and figure out how to scale sustainably. And we're always changing it. I would say that should never freak someone out from talking to us. Like, oh, they have advertising, they have those things. We will always try to understand a need and where the, you know, how we can work together. Sometimes it's, okay, great, we love your event, we'll put it in the event listing and it'll be down there, but we can't do a bigger write-up. We just literally don't have time in the day with our staff and abilities. And other times we'll say, hey, you know, if you have a budget, we can do a bigger comprehensive thing. And we do the marketing, I think, fairly well, that we can make sure that you're getting multiple touch points, you're getting all the things, and we're going to make sure that we can do a bigger write-up. But I think at the end of the day, it's just really capacity issues for us. And that, I think, probably we're the least traditional in that sense of that sort of model.
Great. Anyone else want to talk about paid content, editorial versus advertorial in your world?
Yeah, I will say that, and I've only been an editor-in-chief for about 3 or 4 years, and I was never confronted with this before until now. So, you know, we have advertisers, and then when my publisher says, oh, by the way, we got to do this story on one of our advertisers. And I'm like, well, why? How does that fit into what I'm doing? And I'm an old school journalist. And so I stick by the book. And so I slowly realized, oh, this is the dance that we have to play sometimes in order to, you know, stay afloat. That's just the reality of it. And so I think initially I resisted, but then eventually I acquiesced, only to the point that if I have to do a story on an advertiser, it's going to be a story. It's going to be a legitimate story. It's not going to be necessarily a fluff piece. So I'm going to put a freelancer on the story, and we're going to cover it just like we cover anything else. And so that's the approach that I've taken, because I do want to stick to my strong journalistic ethics. But at the same time, on the business side, I understand that, you know, that's the direction that we're going in, particularly with publications that are losing revenues, that are losing advertisers. And it's become increasingly tougher and tougher to secure someone to buy a full page ad in your magazine or your newspaper. So I get it, I understand, and, you know, sometimes you have to roll with it. But by no means am I going to compromise my journalistic ethics for the sake of sales.
Great. Okay, well, I know we're running a little bit behind schedule. There are a couple of other topics that I believe Jean and Laura want to get to today, but I wanted to just give everyone on the panel who all had terrific insights. Thank you so much. I wanted to give you all an opportunity to offer some final thoughts, words of wisdom, anything you feel like we probably should have touched on that would be helpful for this particular audience to know, to help them work with you more effectively. Maybe if you could just offer a couple final thoughts, and also the best way to reach you and develop a relationship with you would be great as well. So I will take that to Merivet first.
So what I would say is to just try reaching out. So when I started off, I wasn't really sure what I was doing. It wasn't until I started reaching out to peers in the community, whether it was to kind of meet up with them and figure out how to sort of start working and running a publication, or how to work with contributors, or whatever the case may be. I started reaching out, and it really helped me sort of build a foundation for what I wanted to do. And even in terms of just telling the stories, we've DM'd people on Instagram to do write-ups on them. We've just, you know, messaged them in their inboxes. Whatever the case may be, we would just reach out. So like, don't feel disappointed if you don't get a response. Just go on to the next one. Because there's always somebody that needs to tell the story that you're looking to tell. It's just finding the right, you know, whether it's publication or outlet that can do it. So I always recommend people to just ask and reach out. And if you want to reach out to me, you can email me at maribet@themujerista.com. I think I entered it in the chat. That's the best way for you to get in contact with me.
Great. Melina?
I would just say, in terms of how to get in touch with me, first of all, it's editor@artburstmiami.com. And between emails or pitches, or my feeling is that we're not trying to make this difficult. You know, email is fine. It's really, it's not about, you know, having to make the experience, you know, a difficult and unpleasant one. It's really just, you know, include those key ingredients and you should be fine. You know, the things that we talked about is fine. Email is fine, as we spoke about before. Social media is fine, and just have some fun with it. You know, if you're talking about, you know, you're trying to pitch us a great story and about, you know, about something in the arts, have some fun with it.
Great. Thank you. Dani, do you want to give some final thoughts?
Yeah, well, I wanted to say that people should consider that their social media outlets are really a portfolio. Would it be an artist or an institution? This is where nowadays people are going to see who you are, what you're doing, and then that should be consistent with the message that you wanna portray. So that's something that it's very key and basic nowadays. And I'm consuming and looking at this all the time, so I'm very, very happy to give people feedback or any help. To reach me out through social media, it's perfect. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but I live on Instagram most of the time. And you can email me, of course, through, and Instagram has an option for people to email. And my site is art.scene, SEEN.365, meaning like I was trying to do this like every day of the year. So that's where that's coming from.
Great. And I see the panelists are also putting their contact information in the chat section of the of Zoom here. So if you didn't catch that, you can take a look there and get their contact information. Bruce, any final thoughts, words of advice to the artists and arts marketers that are in this group?
Yeah, I think one little quick tidbit or like snippet is, I think maybe just because one, you know, we try to respond to people, but even if we don't respond to a pitch or we don't feature you, that doesn't mean you haven't caught our eye and that we might be thinking, oh, they're doing some neat stuff over there. It just might be about space or time and availability, or frankly, you know, sometimes we would have like competition with our own events. We're like, oh, well, we gotta, you know, focusing on our thing we're doing or something like that. And people are doing some really cool stuff, and I would say continue to reach out. You know, like our publications are only as good as the communities that engage with them, and we need to know what's going on. We literally can't be everywhere. As much as we try to have, you know, structure and formats to how we're reaching out and meeting new audience, we literally can't do it, especially with diminishing newsrooms across the US. And my other thing is, I am so excited to see, you know, again, the silver lining here, the innovation going on in the community here. I think if there's ever a time for forgiveness and sloppiness or whatever, and doing prototypes, now is the time. You know, TV hosts are doing their shows from their living room, and the audio is essentially bad, the quality is okay, and they're doing that, and they have this like all these vast resources. Just go out and make cool stuff. Share it with us. This is a time for you to carve out what you can be in the next, when we get out of this, whatever that next phase is called, and start to think about, what does your brand become and how do you reach new audience? This has always been a question with arts organizations too, is they need to reach new audience, right? We know that a demo is aging out. Time to start playing, and let us know what you're doing, because now more than ever, people can kind of pop in and out and discover your org and think about collaborations. And I don't know, please hit me up with any questions, especially with this whole, like, you know, great, I want to do stuff, I don't know how to do it. I'm more than happy to talk. This is a really cool time for us to just start meeting new people and making connections and sharing information. So I dropped my email in there earlier, but it's just bruce@whereby.us. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Bruce. That's really great. We got one more, Russell, I'm going to hand it over to you in just a second, but I wanted to tell all the attendees that this, we're going to have a Q&A period actually after this conversation. So hang in there, don't drop off. We've got some more good content for you. But final last thoughts, Russell? Anything to add to Bruce's point?
Yeah, well, I like building relationships. Because people like doing business with people who they know and they trust and are reliable. I mentioned Lisa Pally earlier, and I can say that we've built a relationship. I mean, she has what I need as far as content, and I have what she needs as far as a magazine, an avenue to run her content. And so as a result, and I'm just using this as an example, as a result of our relationship, my magazine is able to produce a Miami Book Fair issue, which is huge. This is huge for my magazine as well as for the Miami Book Fair, because now the book fair is able to promote African-American authors that are going to be presenting their publications at this book fair. And so it was just a win-win situation because of our relationship, because of our trust. And I really appreciate that. So I say that to say that, you know, anyone else who has content, it's really good to get to know the people who you want to do business with or you want to pitch your information to. Also, LinkedIn has been very good to me for the last probably 4 months. And I've always had a LinkedIn account, but until 4 months ago, I really wasn't really active, and I don't know why. But I'm glad I am now, because I'm meeting so many professionals, making so many connections. In fact, a couple of people who are viewing this webinar have already hit me up on LinkedIn and made that connection. So I think that's just very important. And I prefer LinkedIn to meet you, because I want to know who you are. I want to know how you look. I want to see your profile and get your background, as opposed to just an email with a name. So I think that helps me, kind of decipher who you are and, ultimately decide, do I want to do business with you, or do I want to, run your story? So my LinkedIn is my name, Russell Motley. Please look me up and connect with me.
Great. Thank you, Russell.
I've also put my information in the chat section as well.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Please hang in there. We're going to have an opportunity to field some questions from the attendees of this meeting. Jean, do you want to take back the controls at this point?
Yeah, let me unmute myself. Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to know that you all are there and that we're all together and all in this together. And I will talk a little bit about the worksheet, which is really interesting because in actuality, as a PR person, this is what I do. So it's funny to see it kind of written out like that and broken down, because these are things that you just kind of process in your mind. So I really do suggest you use this worksheet because it will help you. The other thing is that when you do PR, it's kind of like a full-time job. So that's why this worksheet is really, really helpful, because in your lives, PR is just a component of what you do. So this worksheet will really, really help you to focus your ideas, focus your pitch, and figure out who you want to pitch what to. So I just want to start with something that happened to me just the other day. One of my projects I work with the Children's Trust, and I'm working on some stories about childcare here in Miami. And so they wanted to get out the point of what the trust is doing. And I said, that's really great, but it might be better to kind of turn the story upside down from the perspective of those who are being helped. So I was able to get my point across with the trust, as well as putting the story in front of the media. So when you start to think about PR in your stories, think about the editor and the reader. And media is, as we've heard, is really, really tight. And so you really have to illustrate and draw out your story to make it relevant, because it's also about the reader. Any questions? All right. Okay. Well, anybody else, any other panelists have anything to say, anything to add?
I just want to say that I totally agree with what you just expressed. The relevant portion of that is extremely important. I think one of the other panelists had mentioned the research aspect of it. You know who you're pitching, know who they are, know what they cover, know what their publications cover. I think that's for sure step one. One of the things that I impart to my students, make sure that you're fully aware of this person and the publication they represent. Otherwise, it's gonna fall flat, no matter how great your pitch is. If it's not relevant, it's never gonna go anywhere.
That is very, very true. And also pay attention to what's going on in the news so that you can frame your story as to what's happening. Because yes, there are art stories as well as stories that you can integrate arts into.
So I'm just going to cut off here. We do have a 11 a.m. cutoff, and I want to just have an opportunity to say thank you to everyone who attended. I don't want us to break off in the middle of a conversation. I know we have lots of things to say. I invite you, when you get that email, please pick a session. Our table leaders have been very generous with their time and their energy, and we really, we know that they're going to be very helpful in helping to create your pitch. Melinda, do you want to say a quick goodbye? Thank you, everybody. I'm worried it's just going to cut off on us, so I'm kind of rushing, but thank you.
Yeah, no, that's, I just wanted to say, I don't know if anyone can hear me, but there was a question from Farah that we didn't get to, and I'm hoping Farah can reach out to either the table leaders or to the panelists themselves and ask that question. I'm really sorry we ran out of time, but it was a great question. And yeah, and this was a really, really wonderful, I think, experience for everyone. So thank you, Jean. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, John, for organizing it for the Arts and Business Council of Miami.
And maybe we get another free second or so, but thank you, everyone. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean.
Yeah, everybody have a good day. And we'll be seeing each other again soon. Be well.
Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you so much.
Great panel.
Thank you.
Low clap to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay safe, everyone.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.